study,
and play come together on a Windows 11 PC.
And for a limited time, college students get
The best of both worlds.
Get the Unreal College Deal. Everything you need to study and play with select Windows 11 PCs. Eligible students get a year of Microsoft 365 Premium and a year of Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with a custom color Xbox wireless controller. Learn more at windows.com/student offer. While supplies last. Ends June 30th. Terms at aka.ms/collegepc.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Dr. Psych Mom Show. Today, I'm going to talk about whether you are interesting to your spouse, and a lot of people think they're not, and they're right. So, I mean, sometimes you're wrong, but I mean, sometimes you are really picking up on something, that they are not interested in anything that you say, and maybe that's a them problem, but as you know, I like to be honest, and it could also be a you problem, and we will get into that right before I tell you to subscribe, because my most recent subscriber episode was interesting. Hopefully they're all interesting. It was, do you want privacy or are you an addict? And there are 220 other episodes. And if you don't want to share your phone, it might be a you problem. So it always might be a you problem. Like with that's kind of the theme of this show, is like, is it really a you problem? And if so, then what can you fix? So let's get back to the topic at hand. There's a lot of people that say that they come in, they try to talk to their spouse about something. Their spouse is like super bored, not interested, and they try to blame their spouse. But, you know, maybe if you do a deep dive, other people aren't that interested in your stories, and it's been something that always you've had some insecurity about, and people in general on dates or possibly even at work or friends or the kids or whoever, like you just get the sense that you may not be that interesting. Well, you may not be. And why? Why may you not be that interesting? Well, because you do not really open up and you do not really share in any kind of vulnerable or meaningful way. And before you get defensive and you say that the last time you tried to share a feeling, your wife didn't like it, or, you know, whenever you try to share a feeling, your husband doesn't like it, the people who say that are usually literally blaming the other person and complaining about them. So when they say I share a feeling and nobody likes it, they're saying like, I feel that you're an asshole, or I feel that you don't love me, or something like that. And it always goes the same way, and you're always kind of bitching and moaning about something. And yes, in that case, your spouse doesn't want to hear about your feelings, because your feelings are just complaints. However, if you want to actually, like, think about comedy, right? You like stand-up. Everybody likes some stand-up comic. It wouldn't be funny if the person just recited facts, right? It wouldn't be funny if it was just a narrative about, you know, what they did that day. It's funny because they put in their feelings and they comment on it in a way that only they could do, because it relates to only them. You couldn't see it if you watched a video of their day. You still would not hear the things that they say in their comedy routine, because their comedy routine is about their feelings about that and their thoughts and their commentary. Now, nobody's saying that you have to be a stand-up comic, obviously, but if you want to be more interesting, the reason that you're not is usually because you do not have any feelings in your stories. It's extremely hard for anybody, even if they love you, you know, even if it's one of your children and they tell a story. Don't your children tell stories like, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened? And it's really difficult. You know, your eyes eventually glaze over, even though you love your kids super much. So if you tell stories like a child that is very fact-based, then it's really not a shock that your spouse is not interested. You have to inject some feelings and some thoughts into your stories and into your general discourse if you'd like your spouse to be more interested, and if you'd like other people to be more interested, and if you'd like a closer relationship. So how could you do that? Because a lot of, especially guys, say, how could I do that? Because I don't do anything very interesting all day. Well, you don't have to, right? I mean, you could have the most boring job in the world, and if you had interest, like, what about the movie Office Space, right? It's literally, or The Office, the TV show. Those things are about a boring office, and they're hilarious, right? And they're classics because it's about the the feelings of the people and the interactions between the people and how the people engage and what each character thinks and how the characters develop. So you could tell stories like that no matter how boring your day was or your workplace was. Now, you don't have to be gossiping about other people if you don't want to. You shouldn't be saying bad shit about other people, right? That could be funny, but that should not have to be the way that you talk. And most people don't like to talk shit about other people. It's not nice. But what could you do? So let's say that you start off your story. So today I got into work and I was late, and then I got this project, and then I was working on it with Joe, and then my boss said that we actually need it by the next day, and we then have to do a lot of work, and that's why I'm going to be working tonight. And then if we do that, you're so bored, right? You're so bored by my story. But if you said, I was so anxious getting in so late to work today, and then the first thing that happened was Joe, and I get a little bit worried about Joe because I think he's gunning for my job. And then, Joe came over and he said that the boss was on the warpath, and then the boss came over, and I can't stand him. He always seems so anxious. And then, of course, he said that we have to get everything in urgently, which really sucks because that I wanted to go to our daughter's game tonight. Right, so you're interested. There are some feelings. The person who's listening is interested in your story because you shared a vulnerability. You shared that you were worried. You made some observations about other human beings and their character and their personality. And this isn't just a male thing. If you are a woman who was not raised in a home with a lot of emotional discussion, then it's hard for you to be interesting too to your spouse because your stories are also just kind of recitations of facts. And you may say, oh no, I tell him all these gossipy long stories about, this one and that one and these relationships. And if he's not interested in that the first few times, maybe there's something else that you could talk about. Maybe instead of talking about the gossip between the other teachers at work, you could talk about what you think about one of your students in the class, in the example where you're a teacher, obviously. Or if you are a doctor, you could tell him about a patient. Obviously, nothing HIPAA covered, but you know what I mean? You got to know your audience. And that's where comics do a really good job, is they know what other people are going to find funny because they're really kind of good at that. They're good at reading the room, and also they practice and practice and practice their jokes. And if you're married, you have a long time to practice. You have a long time to practice getting more interesting. So what you don't want to do is just keep on complaining that your spouse doesn't look up when you're telling stories and they keep scrolling on their phone. It's very easy to blame your spouse, and maybe your spouse is addicted to their phone, but maybe honestly, maybe you're not trying to communicate that hard, or you don't communicate that well. And in one of those cases, then you can work on your part of that issue without just blaming your spouse. And a lot of it is that you are not reading the room. Oh, and then another big one, by the way, is that a lot of people cannot see when the other person is already busy, they're not going to be a good audience. So they'll say, my wife didn't listen to my story about work, or my husband didn't listen to my story about work, but you literally walked into the room. They were in the middle of doing something and you just started blabbing or yapping, as the kids say, and you didn't kind of even give them any time to switch into being an audience member. So they're going to be resentful and they don't want to be interrupted, and therefore it's going to go worse. So certainly you got to read the room for when they are receptive, which is probably not when they're in the middle of something. And then also think about what they find interesting. Does your wife want to hear about, the facts of your commute, or would she like to hear a feeling? I know she'd like to hear a feeling if you've already tried the facts and the facts haven't really piqued her interest. And maybe it's the opposite if you're a woman trying to talk to your husband, right? And you've been saying, oh, this girl at work did this and that and this, and she felt this and he felt that, and this relationship, this and that. And meanwhile, he would be so much more interested if you told him about the facts of what you did during the day. Could be totally the opposite. So it's so easy to be hurt and to say my partner ignores me and my partner doesn't find me interesting, as though that's just the way that it has to be forever. Or you could do what hopefully you would do in other aspects of your life, which is if something's not working, try something else, right? Try a different way of communicating. Try a different way of connecting. Try more facts if you do feelings. Try more feelings if you do facts. Try to wait until they're in a receptive place. Try to think about other stories you've told that have been received well and why. It makes a person feel very unknown, honestly, if they're an audience member and the story is a story they already haven't liked. So sometimes like guys will like say like gross things to their wife, like literally. This is especially younger clients. Like they'll say, oh, like I saw this video, this guy, like he was having eye surgery and there's an eye and this blood and literally. And the woman like hates that type of shit. She doesn't ever want to hear about anything bloody. She doesn't want to hear about gore. She doesn't want to hear about the car accident he saw on the way. She doesn't want to hear, to work, or she doesn't want to hear about anything like that, or something like somebody died or some murder or something from the news. Like if she hates those kind of things, like, and you keep talking about those kind of things, she's going to feel very unknown, right? And it's the same thing with any topic. There's a lot of people that say that their spouse isn't interested in what they have to say. And then when I get them in couples therapy or I get the spouse to come in, which I do often as like a consult session to kind of understand the spouse's perspective on my client, the spouse says something totally different about the communication style, like that the topics chosen are always those that make them uncomfortable, or the person always wants to talk late night or early morning when the spouse is not really able to give their full attention. And there's like always a lot of other things to the story. So just kind of taking this intellectually lazy victim route of saying, poor me, my spouse doesn't find me interesting. Why don't you instead say like, basically, I did a talk and the audience didn't like my talk. Why? What could I do better? As a second try next time, would I give the exact same talk? Not unless I'm stupid, right? And you're not. If you're listening to this, you're very smart, at least in terms of the podcasts you like. But like if, for example, I got all this feedback that every single person hated this podcast, or I just saw the numbers, and I do this like all the time. I look at the numbers and I'm like, oh, like I did something on OCD and barely anybody listened. I guess that isn't a good topic, right? So if I saw that fewer people listened to the podcast topic on OCD and I just kept on every day talking about OCD, well, I would deserve to have my numbers dwindle, right? Because I'm not responding to what people like. But you may be doing the exact same thing. You come in and you talk a certain way about a certain topic in a certain style to your spouse that hasn't ever worked, and then you complain that they don't like to talk to you. But you're not responding to the feedback that implicitly they are giving you by turning away or going back on their phone or looking at you stone-faced or giving a half a laugh or a fake laugh or whatever. And instead you're choosing to view it as that they don't love you or they're rejecting you, instead of saying I could learn to communicate in a way that would make them respond better. And that might be a skill that would be good for me in other domains as well. All right, I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I will talk to y'all soon. Have a great day. And as always, if you need a therapist or a coach, reach out to me and my practice at Best Life Behavioral Health. All right, bye guys.